healthy lawn creates oxygen, captures dust, and holds dirt in place. Lawns prevent soil erosion and traps pollutants from stormwater that would otherwise end up in our sewer systems. Also, according to data from the Lawn Institute, research modeling of carbon sequestration by lawns indicates that lawns in the United States alone can sequester between 12 and 95 million tons of atmospheric carbon dioxide per year. And finally, lawns are natural air conditioners. They can be up to 30 degrees cooler than blacktop on our hottest days. One key element to a healthy and vibrant lawn is proper fertilization. The distillation is: perform a data-driven assessment of the current lawn by obtaining a soil test. Based on the soil test report, determine which, if any, non-fertilizer amendments may be needed. Determine the type of fertilizer needed and the nitrogen rate to apply. Also, determine the application rate for the amendments. And finally, establish an activity schedule detailing what to do and when to do it for the next year. That's the distillation. For more details, keep watching. Before going into all of the reasons why you should apply fertilizer and other lawn amendments and proper rates, I'm going to go over some of the steps I took to determine what I needed to put down and how I needed to put it down and how much. So the first thing I did was I went to my local co-op and got the packages to submit a soil test. And it's these little cardboard boxes that you get, and you bring them back home, open them up. It also has instructions on them, and they tell you to go around your yard in kind of a grid pattern to get a sample set that you can supply to them. You dry this sample set out, you remove any kind of debris from the sample set, mix it up and put it in the container, mail it off with payment, and they return your results. If for some reason you have parts of your yard that look like they're different or have different compositions or consistencies, for those areas, you would probably submit 2 different tests for each respective area. But you send it off and they send you back a report. And this is the report for my yard. Right away, I can tell from this first analysis section that I'm in pretty good shape for a lot of the nutrients. Everything is coming back either high, very high, or sufficient. So I don't have to worry too much about core nutrients. And as you can see, a lot of these nutrients are the same nutrients that a person would need. Phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc, manganese, copper, iron, boron. Those are all things that people need as well. It kind of makes sense. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, right? So I'm good there. But when it comes to fertilizer, the 3 most important nutrients that you'll see are going to be nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And here, my phosphorus is high minus, and my potassium is also high. Next up is the soil pH. Now, the soil pH is actually the reason why I did the test. My pH here is 5.9. These other numbers, they can give you an indication of what's happening with some of the other elements. And here, even the pH, it gives the actual percentages. If you add these 2 up, that'll come out to be 100. But 5.9 is actually somewhat okay. If I go to this article at Oregon State University called pH Tolerance, it talks about how the best growth pH range is going to be 5.5 to 7.5. And further on in the article, it breaks it down even further from another paper where it talks about how the best growth happens from 6.0 to 7.0. So what that tells me, between 5.5 and the 6.0, right in between both of those, regardless of which one of these you use, 6.5 is going to be the sweet spot. That's what I want to shoot for. But if I'm off a little bit over, a little bit under, I'm fine as long as I'm in that 6.0 to 7.0 range. And I'm really close if I go by what was reported on my soil test report. Below those things, I also have recommendations that were given to me from the co-op. The first thing is the lime recommendation. Because of the pH level, they're suggesting that I put down 110 pounds of limestone per 1,000 square feet. And they also recommend that I do this in batches. So I start with maybe 50 pounds and then scale up to do another 50 pounds. And then they also give me a fertilizer recommendation. Here for my fertilizer recommendation, because all of my nutrients that come in commercial fertilizer, there are only 3 for the most part that you get. The phosphorus and potassium are high. They're recommending that I zero out everything else. So I'm getting some number 00 for all of these recommendations: 3100, 33.500, 4600. It doesn't matter what fertilizer I use as long as everything else is zeroed out except for the nitrogen. And they're also suggesting that instead of me applying at the 1 pound per 1,000 square foot rate, which is the upper limit for what you would typically put down, you don't want to put down more than 1 pound per 1,000 square feet, because it can cause problems to either the thing that you're planting or the environment. For me, they recommend 0.7 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So I'm going to follow this to the letter, how they have it recommended to me once the lawn is established. However, for my establishment phase, I'm probably not going to do this. I'm going to put down regular starter fertilizer that's going to have a little bit of phosphorus in it. It's going to have some potassium in it, because I want the lawn to get off to a good start. I don't want any mistakes. And for that, I'd rather it has everything it needs to get started. Once my lawn is started, these recommendations will be my method going forward, and I won't deviate from it until my next soil test. As long as the lawn looks good, things seem healthy, I don't see a reason to really stop this. And I won't be putting down quite as much. This is about 1/3 less of the amount of nitrogen that I'll be putting down, where if I hadn't gotten the test, I wouldn't be doing it this way. So I'm going to be saving myself money and a little bit less of an environmental impact by doing this. So I'm going to use the numbers on this bag to plug into the calculator. And here I like Lesco's brand because they put the numbers right up front. It's right up front on the bag: 18, 24, 12 for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium of what I need for the lawn. It's a 50-pound bag according to the label, and it's designed to cover 12,000 square feet at the maximum application rate. Let's go to the calculator and see what that works out to be for my application. So looking at the Omni calculator, there are some values that I need to put into the calculator to get the application rates and what I need to do for my particular situation. We'll start off by putting in the area that I'm working with. And for me, it's about 5,000 square feet. So we put that number in, 18, 24, 12. And then I want an application rate. So let's see what it'll be if we did the maximum application rate. As soon as I put this number in, it populates the values for these other things. So I know how much phosphorus and potassium is going to be going down if I put down 1 pound of nitrogen using this fertilizer with this nutrient profile. And that means I'll need 27 pounds of fertilizer for the entire job and 5.5 pounds for each 1,000 square feet. Now, for my application rate, let's see how that changes. Okay, so it dropped it down significantly. That means I'm going to be able to get 2.5 applications out of this one bag. So instead of me using significantly more of that bag, I'm going to use a lot less. 2 of these 50-pound bags, that's going to give me 5 applications. That would last me over a year with something with this nutrient profile. Now, something with a higher nitrogen value, and let's just say that we had something that was a 30-0-0, and I wanted a nitrogen rate of 0.7. Wow, with a 50-pound bag, for a 5,000 square foot area, you're looking at 11.67 pounds of fertilizer. For me, I'll probably just round that down and do 10 pounds, break that bag up into 5, and I'm going to get 5 applications out of that one bag. I don't think there's a need to over fertilize. Maybe in the fall, I might fertilize a little bit heavier and throw some extra down to get caught up so I have a good green up in the spring. But this is going to work out really good for me. This calculator is a really good one. I also like calculator.net, but I don't think they have a fertilizer calculator. So check that out if this is something that you feel can help you. But I really want to talk about some of the impacts that you can get and why it's so important to go back and do some of these things in a certain order. Get your soil test done and get a recommendation on what you need to put down as far as any amendments, in this case lime, what fertilizer you need to use, know what your pH is. The soil test is going to help you get that. Figure out what kind of fertilizer you need. In this case, again, I'm using starter fertilizer instead of a regular fertilizer because I'm putting new grass seed down, but after that I'll be using a regular fertilizer. And staying within an appropriate range. You don't know what the range is if you don't get the soil test, so you won't know what the pH that you're supposed to be in is without getting that test. And then calculate the appropriate rate so that you don't put down too much product. Error on the side of putting down a little bit less product. I think it works out in the mix. As long as I can get within the range, I think we're going to be okay. That's why I'm getting the test to make sure that the numbers are good. I think what's recommended is that you get a soil test every 3 years. So for me, I'll probably do it every 2 years. And that way I know that I'm in pretty good shape and can see what's working, what's not. And if I have to make adjustments with the application rates that I'm putting down, this will help me do that. There's a problem though with putting down too much, in some cases too little, of amendments or things that you put on the lawn. These things affect the environment. They affect us in negative ways if we're not mindful of how we're going about our business. In this particular article, they talk about how too much nitrogen and phosphorus in the water can cause algae blooms. And these algae blooms, they contaminate the water. They reduce the amount of oxygen in the water, which can affect the wildlife. It can taint the ecosystem in a way that causes bacterial growth and elevated toxin levels. And that affects all of us very negatively. And we can do a lot to stop it. The effects on these are many. And so here, as I go through this EPA article, they talk about stomach and liver illness, respiratory problems, neurological effects. People can be experiencing these things not knowing that it's caused by the water that they're around, how it can even be fatal depending on how old they are, what they were exposed to, when they were exposed to it, how they were exposed to it. Direct exposure introduces toxins into the ecosystem that are taken up by the larger animals, things that eat other things. So that's going to be eaten by smaller fish that are going to be eaten by larger fish that are going to be eaten by larger animals. But the toxin just moves up the chain. They talk about dead zones and hypoxia, where there's not enough oxygen in the water. So that's going to impact aquatic life as well. Acid rain and air pollution. And then finally, the economic impacts, the drinking water costs, the tourism losses, the commercial fishing and shellfish losses, and the real estate losses. So all of these things are impacted just by people putting, too much fertilizer down or not being responsible with how they handle it. And in this example for the drinking water costs, they talk about how it costs 5 to 10 cents per 1,000 gallons to over $4 per 1,000 gallons in Minnesota to treat this water. Well, that's something that the citizens are paying for. And then the tourism losses, losses of $1 billion each year from people just not wanting to go to an area or being turned off because the area is unsafe it's kind of ruining their vacation. Commercial fishing, you're going to lose your ability to have a good yield if all of the fish are dead, and the fish you're catching, they've been overrun with toxins. That gets passed along to humans. We're consumers, and the consumption that we have is with food that we're eating out of these waters that are contaminated. And then finally, the real estate losses. So now you're also losing money because you can't sell your house. This is going to reduce, or has the ability to reduce, the value of your home by up to 25%. All of these things are important, and it's so easy to do. Just be responsible putting down these chemicals, amendments, and products on your lawn, and you're going to be in pretty good shape. And that means putting things down at the appropriate rate, at the appropriate time, in the appropriate way. When you put down fertilizer, you're supposed to water it in. Make sure you water it in. If you spill some on the sidewalk or you're putting it down, you have one of those rotary spreaders and it throws it everywhere and it gets in the street, sweep that up and throw it back in the yard. Sweep it off of the driveway, throw it back in the yard. And that way, all of the product gets where it belongs and it stays away from where it doesn't belong. And we all benefit from that. To wrap up, just taking a little more time to be thoughtful and deliberate about how you apply amendments and products to your lawn can have a positive impact on the environment and also your project. This not only applies to fertilizer, it also applies to insecticide, fungicides, and other lawn amendments. Good luck on your next project, and thanks for watching.